There comes a moment that's hard to name, quiet, subtle, but heavy. You wake up and look around at your life and realize everything is still in place. The job, the family, the structure you spent years building. And yet, something inside you has unraveled. You're no longer who you were when you built this life. And none of it feels like it fits anymore. But how do you explain that to anyone when it barely makes sense to you? There's no crisis, no tragedy, just a quiet ache, a nagging dissonance. You feel like a guest inside your own world, like you're speaking lines you didn't write, like your soul is looking for the exit, but your body keeps showing up. Most people feel that and run. They double down on what's familiar. They distract themselves with noise. More effort, more hustle, more routine. Because if you can't feel aligned, you can at least stay busy, right? But you didn't run. You're still here. And that means something. It means you're not numb enough to pretend. It means something stronger than fear has begun to take root within you. It means some part of you is asking not how to go back, but how to go deeper this moment, this fog you're standing in. It's not dysfunction, it's initiation. Marcus Aurelius once said, at some point you have to stop before your body does. And maybe that's what this is, a quiet, internal stop sign. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally wise enough to pause before pretending becomes your personality. You're feeling what most people will avoid their entire lives. The moment you've outgrown your old self, it's rare to get here. Most people stay in lives that no longer fit just because they're too afraid to feel misaligned. But not you. You're still listening. You're still here. And that's where everything begins to shift. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're not lost. You've simply reached the edge of who you were, and you're standing at the door of who you're becoming. Most won't go through that door, but you're already halfway in. We're taught to fear being lost, to label it as failure, to treat uncertainty as a flaw in the plan, a detour, something to fix. But what if being lost is the beginning of becoming? What if that quiet disorientation is not a misstep, but an invitation? The truth is, you don't get to clarity without passing through confusion. Lost isn't weak, it's wise. It's wise enough to let go of maps that no longer apply. It's wise enough to stop pretending the old self still fits. Think of identity, like a cliffside. Over time, the waves crash and erode what was rigid. Stone turns to soil, the edge reshapes, old structures fall away. And in that breaking, space is made for something entirely new. Or imagine the early morning fog. You can't see more than a few steps ahead, but the sun still rises. Clarity still comes, not because you force it, but because you have the patience to wait for it. And while most people panic in the fog, the Stoic learns to stand still. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." We suffer most, not because we're lost, but because we believe we shouldn't be. But who told you that confusion was shameful? That inner transition should be clean? That growth was supposed to come without grief? The Stoics didn't build identity around pleasure, achievement, or ego. They built it around virtue, around truth, around what endures when everything else falls away. You are not lost because you're missing something. You are lost because you're dissolving what no longer serves, and that is courage in motion. The caterpillar isn't lost in the cocoon. It's transforming. The forest isn't lost in winter. It's preparing to bloom. And you're standing in that same space, the one after letting go, but before becoming. Don't rush it. Don't run from it. Don't numb it. Being lost is not failure. It's the wisdom of knowing that before you build something new, you must burn what no longer belongs. When the internal fog sets in, when the ground of your identity starts to shift, most people retreat. Not visibly, not all at once, but slowly, subtly. They double down on the version of themselves they were taught to be, even when it no longer fits. They cling to titles, to habits, to people who no longer see them, because familiarity, even when suffocating, feels safer than the mystery of becoming someone new. They chase productivity instead of peace. They scroll instead of feel. They strive instead of stop. And on the surface, it looks like strength, like resilience, but it's not. It's retreat, disguised as discipline. The Stoic does something different. When the ground trembles, the Stoic rebuilds, not around image or ego, but around truth, where most people add noise. The Stoic moves toward silence, where most look outward for answers. The Stoic turns inward, not to escape, but to realign, to return, to choose again. Take Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome. Unimaginable power, constant crisis. He faced plague, betrayal, war, loss within his family, disillusionment among his people, and where did he go? Not to conquest, not to applause. He went to a journal, just a leather-bound, quiet space where he could question everything. Most people build walls in times of uncertainty. Marcus built awareness. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength, even in chaos." He refused to abandon himself. That's the practice. That's the path. You get to choose what happens next. Will you reinforce what's crumbling? Or will you rebuild from the inside out? The outer world may ask you to perform, but your inner world is begging you to be real. That's where the Stoic begins again. Not loudly, but deliberately. So make silence a strategy. Make reflection your ritual, because most people run from themselves in hard seasons. But the Stoic stays stills and rebuilds from what cannot be shaken. You didn't choose all of your identities. Some you inherited, some you performed. Others you put on like armor because they helped you survive, and for a time they worked. The achiever, the rescuer, the responsible one, maybe you were the peacemaker in your family. Maybe you learned to be successful so you wouldn't be abandoned. Maybe you learned to be small so you wouldn't be a burden. Those roles got you here. They kept you safe. They earned you love, approval, protection, but now they're starting to feel heavy, like clothes that no longer fit. A little too tight in the chest, not enough room to breathe. You show up to the same job. You're present in the same relationship. You say the same words, but it all echoes strangely inside you, and you can't explain why. What you're feeling isn't disconnection, it's realignment. The version of you that built this life, they're not bad, but they were built around other people's expectations. And now, you're beginning to hear your own voice underneath the noise. It starts as restlessness, as resistance, as I don't know who I am anymore. But that's not confusion. It's clarity trying to get through. The Stoics didn't build their lives around image. They built them around virtue, around internal truth. Epictetus said, "Know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly." Not become who everyone needs you to be, but know yourself deeply and live from that. Here's a journaling prompt to begin that. What role am I still playing that no longer reflects who I am? Where am I performing instead of participating? What am I holding together that no longer needs to be held? You are not broken for feeling distant inside your own life. You're not lazy, you're not flaky, you're becoming someone more whole. And that version of you has no interest in pretending. Let the old roles go. The performance isn't needed anymore. Who you are now doesn't require a mask. There's a quiet pull you've been feeling. Something deeper than restlessness, quieter than urgency, too vague to explain, but too persistent to ignore. It slips in during silent moments when everything goes still and you realize that what once fulfilled you doesn't anymore. You're not sure what you want now, you just know it's not this. And that's terrifying, right? Because you built your life around one version of yourself, and now you feel like you're floating somewhere in between this in-between. It's sacred. Most people rush to fill it with noise, with plans, with obligations, because emptiness is uncomfortable. But what you're feeling isn't emptiness. It's space. It's the space left behind by the things you've outgrown. It's the arrival of your next self, quiet, patient, waiting for you to stop running long enough to hear it, Seneca wrote. If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. But what if your path isn't defined by destination? Right now, what if this isn't about knowing where you're going, but trusting what you're becoming? Longing isn't confusion. It's clarity beginning to speak, not in instructions, but in questions that echo louder than certainty. Why doesn't this feel like enough? What is pulling me away from the life I thought I wanted? And here's the actionable truth. Don't fill the space, sit in it. Let it stir you. Let it reveal what no longer belongs. Let it filter out what was never yours to carry. You're not drifting, you're being summoned. That ache you feel isn't proof that you're broken. It's proof that you're alive enough to notice when something no longer nourishes your soul. You don't need to name where you're headed, you just need to stop running from the place you're being called from. This is not a mistake, this is not a mistake, this is not a misstep. This longing is your compass, pointing home. When you feel your emotions rising, fast, raw, and louder than usual, your instinct might be to shut down, to call it too much, to apologize for crying over nothing, snapping without warning, or feeling everything a little too deeply. But here's the truth, most people never hear. You're not falling apart, you're finally tuning in. Emotional overwhelm isn't dysfunction, it isn't weakness, it's wisdom surfacing. It's the body saying, stop ignoring this. It's your intuition yelling louder than your logic. Most of us are taught to mistrust emotion. We're told to rise above it, control it, or even hide it. But that's not what the Stoics believed. Contrary to modern misinterpretation, Stoicism does not mean suppressing your feelings. It means building the muscle to observe them, to understand them, to let them guide you, not rule you. Marcus Aurelius journaled through grief, anger, fatigue. He didn't deny the storm. He wrote his way through it. He saw emotion as data, not weakness. And when you stop seeing emotion as chaos, a deeper truth starts to break through. That anxiety may not be irrational. It may be misalignment. That sadness may not be depression. It may be grief over an old identity you've finally outgrown. That frustration may not be pettiness. It may be a boundary asking to be honored. Your emotions are maps. You just have to stop judging the compass. Here's a prompt to anchor this idea. What am I feeling deeper than I expected? What is this trying to reveal? What is this pulling me toward? What truth have I avoided that this emotion refuses to let me bypass? You don't need to solve the emotion. You need to sit with it long enough to let it speak. The Stoic doesn't run from what they feel. They study it. They respect it. They let it teach them where their life is off course. So next time the intensity rises, don't reach for distraction. Reach inward, not to silence your feelings, but to finally hear them. There's clarity inside the chaos. If you're still enough to receive it, there's a moment in every inner journey where something once sacred starts to feel heavy. The career you gave your best years to, the friendship that once felt like home, the version of you who used to thrive under pressure. And as much as you try to force it, to make it feel good again, to tell yourself it's just a phase, somewhere deep down, you know the truth, you've outgrown it. But letting go isn't easy, because we equate it with quitting. We see release as failure. We internalize endings as weakness. But what if letting go is not the collapse of who you are, but the unfolding of who you're becoming? Growth doesn't always look like addition. Sometimes it looks like subtraction, like silence, like layers falling away, like slowness that no longer feels like stagnation, but surrender. Epictetus once said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Sometimes the what you have to do is walk away from a version of yourself that others adored, but that your soul can no longer carry. You're not betraying your path. By letting go, you're being faithful to who you are becoming. Think of a snake shedding its skin. It doesn't do it in crisis. It does it in peace, because what once protected it has now become too tight. Letting go is how it's able to continue growing. Think of a clay pot with cracks. Letting in light, we try so hard to patch those cracks, but maybe they're not flaws to fix, but invitations for vision to pour in from a source far deeper than what holds us together on the surface. So consider this. What are you gripping out of fear? Letting go isn't quitting, it's choosing to walk. Unburdened, it's not weakness, it's strength with its hands open. You're not giving up, you're giving in. To the next chapter, the truer rhythm, the identity that no longer tries to belong because it already does. Feeling disconnected from your life doesn't mean you're broken. It means something real within you is trying to surface. Something that doesn't want to be ignored anymore. But how do you listen to that quiet becoming in a world that's always shouting? You don't need complex systems. You don't need a life overhaul. You need rhythm, small, grounded anchors to remind you of where you are and who you're becoming. Here are 3 minimalist practices to recenter in that process. 1. Evening unraveling. Prompt at the end of your day. Sit with a journal and write this one question at the top of the page. What didn't feel true today? Was there a moment when you said yes and meant no? A conversation where you smiled but felt hollow? A decision that looked right but felt wrong? Let your answers come unedited. You're not here to perform on paper. You're here to witness yourself. This practice gently reveals where you're still performing and where your becoming is trying to break through. 2. Silent morning sit before the scroll. Before the noise, give yourself 5 minutes of stillness. No music, no journal, no input, just your breath, just your presence. At first, it might feel pointless, restless, but over time, it recalibrates the space between your thoughts. The Stoics didn't start their day with news. They started it with reflection. Silence clears the fog so your own voice can rise. 3. Daily identity check-in. Ask yourself this simple question. Is this aligned with the person I want to become? Ask it before answering that text, before reacting in that meeting, before saying yes out of habit. This question turns automatic behavior into conscious choice. It slows you down just enough to move from authenticity, not obligation. You are not far from your center. You've just been busy surviving. These rituals don't silently change everything overnight, but used consistently, they reconnect you to the quiet self you've been becoming all along. Not loudly, not perfectly, but with reverence, with presence, and with truth. It's easy to look back on certain seasons of your life and label them as failure, to point at the broken plans, the jobs that didn't work out, the relationships that unraveled, and whisper, I messed that up. But what if the moments that felt like endings were actually quiet entrances? Not detours, but direction. Not breakdowns, but breakthroughs in disguise. Imagine someone walking through a dense forest. At first, there's a clear path, well-worn and familiar. But one day, the trail disappears. The rhythm breaks. They try to backtrack. Nothing looks the same. So they push blindly forward, frustrated, confused. Lost in all directions, it feels like failure. But what they can't yet see is that they didn't go off path. They outgrew it. The forest didn't abandon them. It was leading them somewhere deeper, and the old road just wasn't wide enough for who they were becoming. That's what happens when you break free from who you used to be. It's disorienting. You lose your footing. You feel behind. You feel like everyone else is moving forward while you're quietly falling apart. But pause, zoom out. You weren't falling behind. You were falling through a system, a cycle, a version of life that couldn't contain your truth. The moment you thought you were burritos, actually the moment you were planted. The job that collapsed made space for freedom. The friendship that faded made room for peace. The identity that unraveled unlocked the one that never needed to be earned. You weren't off course. You were finally seeing clearly. And sometimes, the only way to get back to yourself is to lose everything that distracted you from that connection. So don't resent the season that brought you to your knees. Honor it because it didn't break you. It broke you open. You weren't lost. You weren't late. You weren't wrong. You were breaking through. And now, you're walking as someone who no longer needs a map because you finally trust your own footsteps. You've walked through fog. You've questioned everything you once held as truth. You've stood at the edge of clarity and still had the courage to keep moving. That is not being lost. That is becoming. You didn't fall off track. You didn't get left behind. You didn't fail. You simply outgrew the version of yourself that was never built to carry the fullness of who you really are. And now, you're standing at your own threshold. Stillness is no longer stagnation. Silence is no longer shame. Longing is no longer confusion. This right here, is your arrival. Not at the final destination, but at the beginning of a deeper chapter. No longer driven by proving, but by presence, by alignment, by quiet power. The world will keep moving fast. People around you will keep performing. But you've seen something they haven't. That letting go isn't quitting, it's growth. That feeling deeply isn't being broken, it's being brave. That slowing down is sometimes the most radical act of self-respect. So, take a breath right now and honor where you are, not who you used to be, not who you think you should already be, but this version, raw, aware. Awakening. You are not lost. You've just outgrown the shell of your old story, and you're finally stepping into one you don't need to explain. because it feels true. If you felt this, if this mirrored something inside of you, comment below. I'm not lost, I've just outgrown who I used to be. Let that be your flame in the darkness. And maybe, just maybe, someone else will read it and realize that they're not alone either. Share your story. You don't need to have all the words. Sometimes a sentence is enough to start community. Subscribe, not for content, but for connection, for clarity, for reminders that you never have to go back to hiding. This isn't the end of the path. This is the moment you stopped walking in someone else's shoe sand, finally returned to your own. You're not lost. You're home. And from here, everything gets real.